All right, good. Yep, we're back. Yay, I got it right. All right, Bama Law. We're gonna finish the Edmund Kemper video. This is like, I think it's from 1990. But if you watch part one, go back and watch part one, and you'll see both of them. And this is the rest of that one, so that way I can fit it on YouTube. Okay. Hang on one second. I'm sorry, not 1990, 91. Take it back. I've never seen the full cut of this. I don't know what they used it for in France, but clearly it was for something. It maybe never saw the light of day, but I don't know.
Maybe, I don't know if the story is true that you beheaded one of your sister's doll and cut off the hands of the doll.
It's interesting you bring that up. I had a cap gun. It was by Mattel, right? Banner 50. It was a very fancy cap gun. I got it in New York City. I went there for one summer with a cousin. And when I came back, my sister was kind of jealous, my little sister. For years, I never really put any value on what happened. Tried to, figure out beyond the obvious what happened in this scenario. But I've since found it plausible to believe that when she was angry or jealous about something, she would fuel her attitude toward resolving something. She hated that cap gun because it came between us as brother and sister. It was something I had that she didn't have. That trip represented something she really wanted, she didn't get, and I did. But very soon after getting back from that trip, she got in an argument with me. It was over something really petty. She got really outraged. She picked up that cap pistol. I said, "Don't throw that." And she threw it right at me. Wham, hard. It hit the floor and my toe, and it hurt bad. But it broke the gun, the inner mechanism. It wouldn't work after that. I picked it up. I found that out. It wouldn't cock and pull the trigger anymore. And that really outraged me. So I said, "So you want to play like that, huh?" So I go running into her room. She says, "What are you doing? What are you doing?" She's shrieking and chasing me, right? So I run into her room and I grab up her Barbie doll. It was the one fancy doll she had, the Barbie doll. Everybody
This has
had
happened
right?
before.
She had a pair of sewing scissors sitting there and a sewing machine, a sewing kit. I grabbed the scissors out.
Sick.
The head didn't decapitate, it pops off. So I popped that off. I said, "Well, that's going to go right back on. That's no damage." So I took the scissors and I cut the hands off the doll. I said, "Here, now you got a toy that doesn't work too good. I got a toy that doesn't work too good." That was my attitude. It wasn't quite just me going and dismembering her doll. Again, I think that's a little bit too quick an assignation. It's not me to judge these professionals, but when they look at me here on Monday morning after the football game and they say, "Gee, here's all these little parts of the puzzle," oh, this indicates what he was going to do. And if that's the case, I want to know about the teenage kid or the preteen kids and the pre and post-puberty kids. They're going through these raging moods and attitudes that go out and kill neighborhood cats. They hang them up from a telephone pole or hang them up from a tree, shoot them full of arrows and set fire to them. I was reading about that in Dear Abby.
Remember, I talked about these guys start out usually harming animals, setting fires, being in the bed till they're much old, way past the age they should be. Definitely harming pets. Man, he's talking about it. He knows the game. He knows it. Guys, he ain't no dummy.
Where are those children today? Are they serial killers? Or are they police chiefs and mayors and aldermen and assemblymen? But I'm saying there are periods in when kids go through very violent development into, potentially violent. They break things, they steal things, they lie, they go through these changes. Yet I've had these people, one or two doctors in particular who I won't go into, who very casually just slapped all these assignations on her and said, "Well, of course, if you run into a kid that's doing this kind of thing, you've got a developing serial killer, you better put him in treatment real quick and save his life," right? To a point, I agree with them. That someone who's acting out and has a dysfunctional childhood or has just gone through a dysfunctional childhood and hasn't gotten violent yet or is heading toward that direction, passive aggressive. Violence was the last thing I exhibited, and then it was murderous violence. Okay? So sure, there's a lot of value in getting youngsters like that help to where they can find themselves and they can find value in themselves and they can find value in interacting with others, and they go in a different direction than what I did. But to just sit there and casually lay these I guess that bothers my ego. I don't know that these people have not worked with me year after year. The psychiatrists and psychologists I deal with are in a prison setting. They're there 8 hours a day. They have to deal with me every day. If I am their patient and I screw up, they can kiss their job and goodbye. They're going to be a lot of hell on them for not seeing this in advance and saying, "Oh, we should lock him up. He might be violent," right? And any psych out there, any professional out there is going to tell you, I think, that if they are going into my mind, into my past, into my feelings, that there's a potential there for acting out or getting uncontrolled or being violent, because they're stripping away the veneer of my civilization. They're stripping away the veneer of the protections of myself. And there's a lot of things that can come jumping out of there. And then to walk out of that therapy session into this kind of a setting, prison, where it's very violent, it's very aggressive, it's a distilled kind of medium that you might encounter on a street corner somewhere, the street corner thug, the street corner punk, or the alleyway where someone is going to take terrible advantage of you or put you in a terrible situation that you may have to be violent to get out of. That's this mainline. I mean, that's where all these guys go.
And he's not wrong on
And I'm
that.
going to walk out of a
That
therapy
is
session
prison.
where this man has been
That's
peeling
it.
my mind, so to speak, and getting into
That's
my
it.
psyche and my soul,
That's what my
and
clients
finding
go
out
through.
what makes me tick, or trying to help put me back together, or help try to put me together for the first time.
Oh, poor Ed.
And then I'm going to walk out of that into this medium. That's not very
Oh, just horrible.
conducive to good health. I'm aware of that
been
going into the
probably
situation.
executed
So I'm
in
twice as
distance.
leery as the doctor is. But unfortunately, he's got all of these mindsets and these theories and these books he's read and that he's trained under. And I guess what has happened in my life kind of jumps out of the book a few chapters ahead. And the way I've experienced it, the psychs don't want to go that far. They don't want to come out there and work the pages back into the book so that I fit in there too, or my kind of criminal fits into there too. They kind of just stand on the edge of the book and they put on their feathers and they put on their paint and they get their rattles and then they hop around and they go into the witch doctor routine. And that I resent, and unfortunately, so do they. When they have to put on their rattles and put their crosses up and say, he's evil, get him away from us. He'll take advantage of us and he'll rape, pillage, and burn, right? So guess what? That's where I'm on the cutting edge of humanity. I find out now, and it doesn't matter that I find this out because
Now
I've
he's
already been
getting
cast out by
agitated.
society. So any things I find out or discover,
Anger,
or even beautiful little things I discover about the ability of the human spirit to heal itself, just to an extent enough where he can make friendships, he can form bonds, he can cry when someone dies of AIDS, or he can feel bad when a friend
That's
gets
odd,
injured or
dies of
killed by
AIDS.
someone else. See what I'm saying? Or grows old and dies,
course, this
unable
is
to go
during
back
the
out to the streets because they
height
won't
of
let him out
epidemic.
early and he's dying,
1990.
that kind of thing. And the feeling that develops, it can develop hard, wicked feelings, it can develop some very tender and some very sad feelings. And then you're trying to deal with the widow of that man through the mail, the very restrictive mail procedures we have here. See, we're not supposed to co-correspond across these lattices of relationship. It's tough to deal with, but you know what? That's my world now. That's what allows me to be sane. Let's call quote unquote sane. That's what allows me to function as a human being, is not doing time with these incredible constraints that I've caused to be on me, right? It's living my life, right? With the limitations that I've caused to happen. Living my life is different than doing time, because then there's the ability to work into that picture. Positive things. Giving things back, like working in the Blind Project, the Volunteers of Vacaville, where we read books onto tape for the blind all over the United States and sometimes in foreign countries. I participated in that program for the last 14 years. I started out with very, very little involvement, reading books, working on beat baseballs for blind sports, doing some clerk work, working on their newsletter, and different jobs in there. Become the reader supervisor, teaching guys how to read the books onto tape. And all the way up to the point where I became the inmate coordinator, which is the lead man there. It's the guy that's in charge of making sure everything works right
This
all
is
the
him.
time.
He's institutional.
And when I first went into that activity, they were saying there were things I could never do. To ask you a question about your interview, did you see a trophy case when you came in?
Yes.
Out in the foyer, there's a trophy case. Take a look at it. There's several trophies in there, and a couple of them have my name on them. And
He's
the
proud
reason
of
is,
that.
I'm asking you that. There's a big 40-inch trophy in there. It's a triple tier trophy, very impressive looking. That's the Volunteer of the Year award. Okay, and it has a little speech on the front of it on a brass plaque that says, "This award is given to the person who most epitomizes what they stand
But he
for."
still didn't ask
You know,
for
the helpful
parole.
service to the handicapped, visually impaired. And this is a very time-honored award. Okay, they've been in existence now for 31 years. I've been in that group for 14 of those years. And when the first couple of years I was there, I used to like, the trophy case used to be in the Blind Project, okay? And I used to walk up and I'd look at that trophy, and I'd never had a trophy in my life. I'd never had a ribbon, I'd never had a plaque, none of that stuff. I'd never tried for it.
Well, you had the Junior Chamber of Commerce.
This is odd. He's not even going.
Okay,
We're not
yeah.
dealing with anything to do with his crimes.
from
or his
actually,
past.
don't-
You're
I
just
forgot, they
being
don't
able
call
to
that
hear
that,
him.
They had to get rid of that name because the Chamber of Commerce took offense to that.
This is
JCs,
him.
yeah, United States JCs. At one point was the youngest JC in America, because I was 19 when I was put in as an associate member who couldn't vote. And by the time I was 20, I was on the board of directors. Yeah, okay.
Remember when
No
he was talking about
trophies,
you,
no
you
plaques,
couldn't
anything
vote
like that.
at the time.
I got some certificates.
In early 70s.
But that was, again, that was an
21.
institution. That's where I'm learning to achieve. I developed a better image of self. and those around me, and I really started cooking. I started doing things real positive. I felt good about it, and that continued on to the streets. I went to the JCs on the streets, but as my relationship, I was too old for my mother. Okay,
I think
what these
that was
experts don't notice
organization.
in the picture, I haven't seen it in writing anywhere. It could be
I believe it.
somewhere.
I think it's the same.
That when I was 14 years old, I ran away from my mother. They mentioned that. But if you look at it in the overall picture, why did I run away? I wanted to be with my father. That's a very topical approach to it. I wanted to get away from my mother because I was dreaming, thinking, fantasizing murder all day long. I couldn't get it out of my head. She and I couldn't battle with her because I was very intimidated by her. She's 6 feet tall. She weighs 2.25, 225 pounds. She's not a fat woman. She's just this great big woman who I was terrified of. She had verbal capabilities you wouldn't believe. I used to watch her field strip grown men in emotional little contests. And when they get to the point where they wanted to smack her, then she started attacking them on beating women. Oh, slap the woman around, you know. And then she'd toy with them on that. And I'd watch these guys dance around the room having fits, knocking out windows, punch a hole in the door, and stomp off. And she could control people like that. I'm sitting there watching that in awe from the one point of view and in terror from the other. I grew up with this stuff. She did that to my dad when they were always battling before the divorce. I'm not trying to put on her what happened to the girls or to her, but I'm saying there was a lot of psychological involvement there.
Did you feel early on?
I got it in the legs. One time I turned around shrieking and she hit me in the mouth, and the little keeper on the clasp flew off, little silver buckle thing. And she smacked me. This thing breaks off on my mouth, right? And she hits me across the face with this belt and says, "Shut up. The neighbors are going to think I'm beating you." I'm looking at her, what? You know, I'm not supposed to cry out, which is a natural reaction to these great red welts that are going on. I was a little shit. I got rude downstairs. She took me upstairs and beat the hell out of me. I would like to think it was a better part of my character that was resisting this kind of pressure to fit into some mold that she had the image of as being the good little kid. I'll be damned if I'm going to be that good little kid. I'm getting the hell beat out of me for not being that little kid. I got I don't know what you call it, resistant to it. But again, it's not in manly ways or in prideful ways. It was sneaky little devious ways. I can get around that. And one of the ways was she won't give me an allowance. I'll take money out of her purse. I never robbed her, took all of it. I'd take a dime here, a quarter there, 15 cents there, 50 cents here.
You know,
she comes in drunk at night. She's not going to know how much change she has.
You took her money.
She started counting her money at all kinds of odd times to keep on top of me. And it was like a game we played for years. At the age of 13, she finally lets me go visit my father, okay, down in LA, where I was born. I'm in Montana, where she was born. I don't like Montana. It's cold in the winter, it's hot in the summer, it's miserable, and the people up there are nice people, but hey, they're not my people. That's what I'm saying now. I wasn't viewing or voicing those things then. I was feeling them, but I didn't know how to put them into words. So I finally get to come down and see my dad again, down in LA.
Almost like he has diarrhea of the mouth.
I never touched her purse again. That scared her. That really bothered her because she'd beat me halfway senseless with that belt, trying to impress, and terror tactics. Okay, we're going to eat dinner and I'm going to beat your ass afterwards. You know, so I could think about it for a half hour. Or after some little thing she's doing. And she tried psychological tactics. She tried, I'm going to put you in an orphanage. I'm going to disavow you. And none of that shit worked. So I go see my dad for 30 days. And my stepbrother and I, we go out and mow lawns. We say, "Gee, Dad, you're going out to dinner tonight. Can we go someplace and eat?" And he says, "Sure." He'd give us a few dollars. We'd go down to some little diner down the street. He treated us like little men. Like he wanted to be treated by he came from a matriarchal household too. I guess if you know how that stuff runs in families, right? Matriarchal household, the son goes out and finds a mother image and marries her. I didn't know all this stuff back then. It would have made a lot more sense, right? But I got this domineering grandmother on my father's side. I got this domineering grandmother on my mother's side who died before I was born, but now she's reincarnated in my mother and her sister, my aunt. They're two very domineering, very aggressive, very successful women. Okay, so these two women are in terrible conflict with each other, competition, you know, and they didn't get along at all. All right, so I'm in the middle of that, trying to find my way. And I go stay with my dad, and I can only say he reflected back on his childhood and said, "Gee, I wish I'd been treated this way." So that's how he treated me and my stepbrother. And we responded to that. We'd go, if we needed spending money, we would go out and we'd do tasks around the neighborhood, clean yards, rake this, mow that, water the flowers, and make a few dollars, and we'd have some fun. Okay, and then sometimes he'd ask us to do something. We'd do it because he was always fair with us and kind, and he was generous with us. So
this is definitely beef.
30 days of doing this opened up whole new feelings in me that I'd never had before. And I wish I'd had more experience with my father growing up, so I could orient more to being tall.
Where's everyone not tall?
Just
the murders.
There was I call it an artificial paranoia that developed. Well, I walk into a room, everybody stops and looks at me because I'm the tallest guy they've seen or the tallest guy in the room. They stop and they look. And ironically, the average or short guy is sitting over there looking at me with great resentment because he wants that attention. I've got it. He thinks it's really neat because he's looking at it from a vicarious position. He doesn't realize that there's thorny sides to that attention. I don't want that attention. I want to just blend into the room. I just want to kind of sidle in. So I see two kinds of tall men or tall male or tall female personalities. Those who are very passive because of all of this thrust on them, or who are very aggressive and they use that and they apply it towards ends. You know, like the little guy who goes out and becomes the bank president and he's the champion this and did that and never saw the fourth grade. Yeah, because he's real aggressive because he's denied all those little attentions. He has to grab them and he has to go out and put himself in the limelight. I get it naturally, so there's resentment. And little guys tormented me all the time I'm growing up.
Did you feel like an outsider, an outcast early on?
I always felt like an outsider, and it's again because I didn't ever fit in. I'd moved around a lot, for one thing. I went to different schools when I was in Los Angeles from age 5 till 7. When I'm going to kindergarten, first grade, second grade, I got in trouble in public school. And I look fondly back on those times because that's when I was acting out and I was normal. You know what I'm saying? I'm not saying I went around and kidnapped people in classrooms or broke windows out. We didn't get into stuff like that. But I was tardy and I was messing around and I was recalcitrant. And I was getting bad marks for it. And my parents were getting called by the PTA. But you know what? That's a hell of a lot better than a few years later when I'm real spooky and I'm real quiet and nobody ever hears from me and I'm in school and I go home and very few people knew me because I'm in that basement and now I'm pulling into myself and now things are getting very morbid in their orientation. I start becoming fascinated with things evolving around death and destruction and evil and all of that. I'm not saying I became a Satan worshiper because I didn't. I was afraid of evil things, afraid of those powers that we all don't understand. And as a little kid, I had a very, very strange orientation to those. I mean, it wasn't rational.
What were your fantasies at that time, morbid fantasies?
At what, about age 8 or 9?
Or later on when you said you were thinking all the time about death?
What I was fantasizing about, I was building up big loads of frustration inside, big loads of hatred, because I had no outlet for it. I should have developed outlets, but I didn't know how at that time. So the outlets that developed themselves, or I developed without knowing it, were fantasies about me being the last. I got that out of a school book, this thing of being the last person alive on the world. And the thing that was posed to me in this textbook was social studies. And it was meant to play upon the loneliness youngsters can feel. And it's a very uncomfortable feeling. And you can't have love and you can't have adventure and you can't have excitement without being able to share it with other people, because that's where a lot of the dimension comes from. Okay, so they posed this thing at me, well, what if you were the last person in the world and you had all these cars and airplanes and boats and ships and things to do, but nobody to share it with, right? Wouldn't that be awful? And I thought, hey, that's a thought. I never thought of that before. So it became a seed, like a little core to fantasies for me. Some mysterious thing has happened and everybody else is gone and I got all these things I can do and no inhibitions, no restrictions. I can do what I want. I don't get yelled at anymore. Okay, that soon became very hollow. So I built upon that and added to it. Well, people were still around, but they were inanimate. They couldn't affect me. They couldn't hurt me. And then it went further and further and further until finally, by the time I'm reaching puberty, I'm approaching puberty, and I'm starting to sense myself, and I've already been accosted by a girlfriend, not sexually, physically, but emotionally. She's trying to, she was a little ahead of me. We're the same age, but she was pretty aggressive, and she's a beautiful young girl.
That's one.
But I wasn't ready for that kind of relationship, and I was scared by it. She kind of cowed me into backing away from the relationship altogether because she wanted to get physical. She wanted to kiss and to neck and to smooch and imitate what she saw in older kids. And that kind of terrified me because I didn't understand the feelings inside.
At one point, your sister teased you also about a woman school teacher. And you said if I wanted to kiss her, I'd have to kill her first.
Yeah, that had been you can imagine how that goes. The deep, dark secrets that one sibling shares with another. It's troubling inside of me. So that was from that period, that more advanced period where people were still there. They just weren't animate. They could not react or respond to what I was feeling or what I was sharing, because what I was sharing was very embarrassing, very humiliating. It's hard to talk about now, really, because it's obviously it affects how a person feels about himself. But it's not too hard to get around that, because then I look at the wreckage I have behind me, the dead people, caused by my self-indulgence in fantasy life, and then my self-indulgence in not doing something about it, like getting help or taking action against myself even. A lot of people committed suicide at early age, and they don't understand why, And a lot of times, again, by troubled parents and school counselors, they'll water it down into, well, he couldn't adjust and he was having a difficult time, so he took his life. I would not want to say too casually that they're probably pretty lucky he did. Not in every case, not even in most cases, but in some of those cases, you might have had some very inwardly violent young people that they had on the one hand the prospect that they're about to act out, and on the other in a very violent way or a very unsocial and socially abhorrent way. And on the other hand, they keep holding it in, and they say, I can't do that. So they, sometimes they kill themselves. I played with death. One of my favorite tricks back then was to go out and lay in front of in the cars, in the traffic. I'm walking down the sidewalk with a friend, it's a roustabout friend. And we're clowning around about something. I'll say, hey, check this out. And I'll go lay in the street like a stiff. I'll lay in the street like I got run over. And a car comes driving by. And of course, I'm expecting this guy isn't drunk. I'm expecting this guy isn't slightly demented and say, hey, there's a kid laying in front of me. Yeah, it's his fault. Boom, boom, just shift gears going over me. They always stop. And they jump out of the car and get all upset when I get up and walk off or run away.
That's
but it was
he's not getting that.
He didn't go lay in front of the car, so I was doing that.
That normal
I laugh
everyday
now because it's embarrassing, but it
things
indicated, I think,
titillate us
how little I
or
thought of myself.
give us something an excitement that we get. Give me playing baseball with your kid. I don't know, something. Maybe riding a roller coaster. And for them, there's that they don't have that part of them. So they go to the most extreme with thrill seeking and maybe skydiving, something that they have to do. That's on the edge. If the more riskier it is for them, the better. And they have very little have poor impulse control issues. So he fits the bill for every serial killer. He's literally a textbook. They kind of wrote the textbook about on him. So this guy's one of the first.
I think it indicated that a part of me would rather I got run over right then than I pursue what I was continuing to pursue in my life. Because, looking at myself and how I was developing inside, nothing good could come of that.
And you had also a great admiration for John Wayne at the time.
He looked a lot like my dad. And he acted a lot like my dad. My dad was kind of a big, loud guy. Actually, John Wayne was 6'4", had very little tiny feet. My dad was 6'7". He had little tiny feet. And you notice how comedians, when they imitate how John Wayne walked, there's this rambling thing with the hips waving, and they always do this trick. You ever wonder why? He didn't just pick that way to walk. I found, quite by accident, that very big men with very little feet, who have abnormally small feet, have a tough time balancing, and it's a little balancing act they're going through. I went to Grauman's Chinese Theater after it was renamed, and I went and checked all those different footprints out, and here I'd grown up as a kid, not a very tall kid looking at other people being like this, much shorter than me. In my mind's eye, it was all balanced, and when I saw pictures of other kids in me, or other people in me, and there's this great difference, it was always shocking to me too, because I never saw it that way. But here I went, and I watch all these movies and TV programs, and I see these people as being bigger than me because I'm a youth. And then I go to this physical exhibit where it shows their foot size. And I step on John Wayne's boot print with his cowboy boot, and my shoe completely covers it over.
Even talking about at this point.
When I was 14 years old, I had bigger feet than he did.
Conversation.
When I was 14 years old, I had bigger feet than my father. I was 6'3.5". He's 6'7".
Crazy.
He works on a construction site as an electrician. I'm going to junior high school. We go to Kinney's. We get the same kind of Oxford shoes, black Oxfords. I wear a 14.5. Excuse me. I wear a 12.5. He wears a 12.
I wear a 13.
In the mix-up of getting up and going to work and going to school in the morning, he comes running around the house looking for his shoes. He grabs mine. I can't find mine, so I go running around the house and I grab his. And all day long, I'm walking around with these pinched feet. I got blisters developing. He's flopping around at work.
The hell this guy's doing anything?
God damn it! Got my kid's shoes again, and they're all saying, "Gee, big Ed."
Sucks.
Your kid you got his shoes on and you're flopping around in them, and he thought that was great. Well, that was a big laugh, right? Hey, I was kind of proud of that too. Following my father's footsteps.
He sucks.
When I was 14 years old, I put his old army jacket on. His Class A uniform. I put his jacket on, and if I had pulled my shoulders forward, I would have ripped it right up the back.
You got all day?
Because I had broader shoulders than he had.
Damn.
My head's larger than he is. I have a very large head. I wear an 8 3/4 helmet for a motorcycle. 8 3/4 is very big. It's hard to find a helmet like that. I got 7 3/8.
And actually, what's strange is that another serial killer from Santa Cruz, Herb Millen, grew up hating John Wayne, actually.
I wouldn't blame him. I was in a jail cell right next to him for months, and I was in prison up in the hole here in the lockup unit for going on 3 years with him, about 2.5 years. And at one point, I got him a job in the kitchen. I was already on the kitchen crew, and a sergeant pulled me aside and asked me to talk to the guys about him coming on the crew, because he'd alienated a lot of the guys, and they were afraid there'd be violence. So I talked to them and there was no problem. So they brought him out to the crew. He worked a few months. He goes to the main line. I'm still sitting in the hole saying,
We'll do the ones that most people don't do.
And, you know, I knew Herbie, and I don't call him Herbert Mullen. And of course, I don't call myself Edmund Emil Kemper III either. I never heard that in my life until I was locked up for murder, right? But little Herbie was, when I met him in Redwood City Jail, okay, our first meeting was I bumped him out of the priority cell where they could look from the office and see through the steel door, the glass in the door, and see him physically, or they could watch the monitor and watch him. He got bumped next door. There was a shower in the priority cell, never had to leave the cell. For him to shower from the other cell, he had to go out into the main area. They had to lock everybody in one of the, I guess you call them tanks. They moved 15 guys, 30 guys out of the tank into the activity area. They'd walk him around into their tank. He'd shower. He'd come back out, and all the way over there and all the way back. They're catcalling him. They're calling him names. They're yelling because he caused them great interruption in their day, right? He resented that. He got bumped out of the priority cell into a non-shower cell. I got the shower cell, right? So he wasn't too friendly at first. And I'd say, excuse me, Mr. Mullen. I says, do you have a bar of soap? There's no soap over here. He took it all with him. He had no need for it, but he took it with him. And he'd say yes. And I'd say, well, can I use a bar of it? He said, no. And I'd say, oh, I got one of these little shits here. And what it is, he's a little wimpy guy that hates big guys because he always feels intimidated by them, right? And that's how we started out. So I started thinking about that. And I went back to my old relationships in therapy and group therapy and Tascadero and youth authority and stuff. And I'm saying, okay, well, we can deal with this. So I said, well, I have to be kind to him. So I found out something he liked. He loved Planters peanuts, little bags of peanuts, shelled peanuts. And so I bought 20, 30 bags of them. I didn't care for them myself. And I offered him some one day. And they were both on camera 24 hours a day. So I said, Herbie, would you like some peanuts? And he'd say, yeah. And I'd say, oh, I got to it. Right down to the inner core there. Yeah. This little childhood thing comes out. I says, oh, here. And he was fascinated by this thought of, gee, he's just giving me some peanuts and I didn't do anything for him. I don't know him. I'm not being nice to him. Why would he give me some peanuts? So he comes over to the bars. We can't even see each other. And I reach out with these peanuts around the side. And I see this little hand come out. I thought of it almost as a little monkey paw. Yeah. That's what it seemed like. So innocent, and this little hand comes out, starts to reach for the
peanuts. He's really good at telling you about how good he is at
and I thought, oh, he's defensive. He's thinking I'm going to grab his hand, rip his arm off or something. I'm this great big guy, right? So without saying anything, I just reached around and I laid him on the bars and then pulled my hand away. And he took them and he enjoyed them and all of that. And I'd say, gee, Herbie, did you eat all those peanuts? And he'd say, oh, no, I still got some left. I said, well, I got plenty more. I said, go ahead and enjoy them. So what I did is I started giving him bags of peanuts. And he had this horrible habit. There's guys back in the tank, and he and I are in these cells facing them through three sets of bars. And I can't see him, and he can't see me. I don't know where on the set of bars he is. The set of bars is maybe 9 feet wide and 8 or 9 feet high. And when he would get to acting up, he'd sit there for hours writing at this little desk. And the other guys were ignoring him. So that night they're watching Saturday Night Special, with all this rock music playing and stuff, and they're enjoying it. He'd get up and make this real loud speech about how bad television is for you and why you shouldn't watch it. All the things it'll do to you. And they're having fits. They're trying to throw things at him. They can't get at him. They're raging. They're mad because he's destroying the one thing they really enjoy. And he's just having a ball doing this. They'll sit for hours all day writing this 2-hour speech, exactly as long as it takes to watch that show. So he'd also sit over there and sing these horrible songs. He couldn't sing a lick at all. And he's singing these horrible songs. And one time I was in the car coming back to Redwood City, and the cop got so upset at the singing he's doing in the back of the station wagon. He turns around with his can of mace. He says, I've had it. Get out of the way, Kemper. And I said, hey, wait a minute. You're going to get me with that stuff. He's trying to mace the guy in the back of the car because he won't shut up. And he's trying to get him to shut up. And the guy just ignored him. He had this way of really getting in people's nerves. So he'd pull these little stunts, these horrible songs and the speeches and things. And I'd say, Herbie, why do you do stuff like that? And he says, oh, I have a right to do what I want to do too. And, yeah, okay, right. So I started this, what they call just real basic behavior modification therapy. Okay, I'd had a little bit of psychology study. I'd worked in the psychiatric area in Tascadero. I knew some of these things. So I set up a very basic and very essential, just bare minimum behavior mod experiment, behavior modification, right? You reward them when they're good, you punish them when they're bad. And you're absolutely accurate in when you do these things. Quick punishment when they do bad and quick reward when they do good. Supposedly, this is supposed to attack you at a subliminal level, a subconscious level, and you don't have a lot of control over your reactions, that it would improve your behavior, essentially. And then they have these great elaborate experiments, like in youth authority when I went through, where they try these things. So what I did is when he was bad, I'd get a cup full of water, a styrofoam cup, and I'd reach around and I'd throw it on him. And it's embarrassing, and it also gets his papers wet, and, so we got in this cat and mouse game. When he was good, I'd give him peanuts, and I'd try to gas him when he was bad. It's called gassing. Throw this water on him. And he'd duck all over the house. I couldn't figure out where he was at, so I kept missing him. So what I did is I waited one day till I knew he was asleep, or I suspected he was, and I called one of the guys over to the bars from the,
I don't know why they call it that.
place in the back.
I guess that's where they live.
And I went like this. I went, and I says, and he reads it. And he says, and I called him over to the bars, and I said, hey, I said, I want to work something out where I can get Herbie with these cups of water, and he can't figure out how I'm doing it. And I says, I just thought of a way. And he says, what's that? And I said, I want you to set up a grid on the bars where you're at. Put a little piece of string or a little piece of plastic or a little something he won't notice. Count over how many bars there are on his cell front, and from the wall, go over that far on your set and set up boundaries. And then when I give you a signal that will be a hand signal, very casually walk over. Don't look at me, just casually walk over and drape yourself on the bars where he's at. So I'll know. And if he's back away from the bars, go back that far and position yourself so it's a grid, it's targeting grid. So he would do this, and Herbie'd hear me turn the water on, or maybe I'd have some already set up, and I would reach through the bars and I blast him. I got him every time. And he couldn't figure out how all of a sudden I got so accurate, you know? And it was without fail. I'd get him with that water, wham. And, you know, it's embarrassing, and everybody's laughing back there, and good shot, Ed, and all that stuff. And then I'd ask him if he'd do something, or hey, can we do this, or whatever, you know, and he'd participate in something with me. I'd give him peanuts. When he's bad, he gets blasted with water. This went on for 2 or 3 weeks. And he actually got away from the bad behavior when he said, hey, I want to sing. And I says, well, hey, guys in the back, do you mind if he sings? Oh, we don't want to hear that shit, man. I said, hey, you want to hear it now, or do you want to hear it tonight when you're watching the show? Yeah, okay. So go ahead, Herbie, sing.
What did you
And
sing?
he'd sing for 30, 40 seconds and then get bored and say, gee, I don't want to do this anymore. You know, because the fun was gone out of it. But the point is, it got a handle on his behavior. And the cops are watching this. The deputies are on camera watching me. I mean, they're on the monitors watching every move I'm making, right?
Insight into
And they're
the mind of a
fascinated. They're watching
murderer,
this thing going back
serial
and forth
killer,
with me and Herbie.
how
They're not
they
involving
think.
themselves. They're just watching it. And after a while, one of them
To me,
came and
that's
said, Herbie is
fascinating.
completely cooperative now. He's not messing around. Because I've been, as we're talking, these little frictions out between he and I'm showing him some insights into why people don't like him. I'm showing some insights into what his behavior is causing in them. And he had realized by that point that it was just he's reacting to how people are reacting to him, and it's just a self-perpetuating thing. And it was the only way he could get out his negative feelings. And I said, well, why don't you focus on the positive instead, and the negative will go away. I don't think anybody ever did that with him before, because he responded real well to it. And later when we were up here in the hole together, and we weren't even supposed to be together. They didn't want us together, but we were up in the hole together. I was the only guy he could talk to. A lot of pain inside, he had a lot of anguish inside, he had a lot of hate inside, and it was addressed at people he didn't even know because he didn't dare do anything to the people he knew, because he was aware of all of the structure around that, and that would be the end of his life. Mm-hmm. And so I started, the way I found out about these things is I would pose little comments or questions aimed at him as we're sitting up there on the tier, on the concrete floor, sitting there against the wall, talking to one another. And I would say, how did you feel? You know, what did you, when you bought that little Saturday Night Special 22, I says, did you ever go out shooting with that? You know, just target shooting? He says, well, not much. And I say, well, try this on. You loaded it up, you went out, you set up bottles, you set up cans, you set them around in little areas right around close and practice shooting them real fast. And he looks at me all shocked. He says, how do you know that? I said, because that's what I used to do. And those were people, those weren't cans and bottles, and you never told anybody. So he got all fascinated about how I was able to read his mind and stuff. I wasn't. I saw a kindred spirit there, somebody who was doing something very similar to what I was doing as a child. He went to mental institutions and he went through these processes where these doctors told him what was wrong with him.
And that leads into the last video we did with Bundy. And he would be the one that would give, I can't think of the guy's name. He was a detective on the case in the 80s, and eventually became the sheriff, I think in King County, Washington, Seattle there. And he was the sheriff when they finally arrested Gary Ridgway. But Bundy in this, it's not in the interview, it was the same time, he got interviewed by the detectives. And like I said before, he called it out. He figured out that they had, he told him, hey, you've spoken to this guy. You've glossed over him. He's just your normal guy, hiding in plain sight. And he had been. In fact, Ridgway had kidnapped a girl who was with, I think it was her brother. I think it's a laundromat or something. Anyway, the brother saw it and chased him down, finally found his home, found the truck. And of course, there was nobody home except for Gary, and the cops, they didn't do anything. And he already killed the girl. So they came close. They had him. They had interviewed him prior. So it's interesting. And these serial killers really do. I mean, they're kindred spirits. I mean, they just are. And as much as I would like to see them be executed for, the ultimate punishment dealt out, we've got to learn from them to stop the others. We have to. And that's a hard trade-off.
These doctors treated things that they decided were wrong with him, and he just sat back very passively and went through these treatments, and they had almost no effect on him because he didn't dare say what was really going on in his head, because they would cast him off somewhere. He'd be totally separated from the human race. And there were certain things he and certain things I enjoyed in being in the human race and being part of the human race. We weren't willing to let go of. So that was that little desperate hanging on. So here comes these professionals saying, oh, this is wrong with you, little lad, and this is wrong with you, and we're going to fix this up, and okay, I'm well, and yeah. Goes out and buys a gun and starts killing people. And I talk about what happened when he killed those people. Oh, they fell dead. And I said, no, they did this, they did that. They gurgled, and some of them kept moving like you hadn't even shot them. And you shot them again. And he says, how did you know this? You weren't there. And I says, I know. I never told anybody that. I know. I was there on my own trip.
I'm telling you.
I know what happened. Herbie, don't give me that bullshit about earthquakes, and don't give me that crap about God was telling you. I said, you couldn't even be talking to me now if God was talking to you, because of the pressure I'm putting on you right now.
End of time.
These little shocking insights into what you did.
Really interesting.
God would start talking to you right now if you were really that kind of ill, because I grew up with people like that. Where? In a maximum security hospital for the criminally insane adults. I was 15 years old when I went there.
To go back before that time, when you ran away from your mother and went to your grandmother.
No,
yes, but afterwards, when you went to your grandmother.
They don't give you much time in prisons.
Why did you feel you had to kill her?
That was an outburst. It wasn't felt I had to. I went up there hoping, I didn't go there for one thing. I got left there. We went there for Christmas from my father's in LA. We went up to the mountains to stay for Christmas, and I got left behind. I was having friction with my stepbrother and my stepmother. There was problems there. We were vying for his interests, vying for his love. They were desperate because they're the new family. I'm desperate because I've never had the man of my life. I wanted my father's love. I wanted his approval. I wanted his recognitions. And we all got very greedy and desperate at that time. So we fought each other a lot. And it was a lot of friction, and he couldn't handle that. So he got rid of me. I was old family. I was already failure. So, I got parked up in the mountains. There's a lot of dressing on it, window dressing and things. But I was up there with them for 10 months. At first it was okay, because it was the calm of being away from Montana. There wasn't the hellish stuff. I was going to a good school. As the months went on, the veneer went away. My grandmother had made agreements with me from the gate that she wouldn't get into little humiliating mind games with me like my mother and stepfather had done, right? And I agreed I wouldn't do certain things. And then this mind game stuff started up. She decides she's going to raise me like she raised her 3 sons, and she's going to get rid of all this negative crap that my mother put on me. She's recognizing it as something my mother put on me, and I don't know that it wasn't. Some of it was, but a lot of it was my inability to deal with complex, critical, psychological situations. I could not deal with them. So I resisted it. I ran away. That was my answer, to run. I ran from the people in Montana. I ran from my mother in Montana. I let my father park me up there to get away from the strife in LA. Now I'm stuck. All the bridges are burned because my grandparents are there 24 hours a day. I can't run from them. She never let me get out of her sight for more than an hour without yelling my name out to see where I was. She was convinced I wanted to go down the mountain into town, little North Fork, to hang around with kids, rowdies and stuff, and be a juvenile delinquent. So she would never let me go down there on my own. She'd never let me leave the property. And
controlling woman.
It started simmering, I guess. Started building the passions and the tension. I started developing the fantasies toward her from my mother, killing her. And in the decapitation fantasies were even there. They were in place by then already. And
what were those
at 15?
What were they?
Yes.
Possessing the severed heads of women. Men didn't turn me on. That wasn't very. I couldn't appreciate the appearances of a guy. I see movies as a youth, and I'm seeing. This was not common, but it was a frequent feature in some movies where they use a shock effect. They'll have someone get their head cut off, or there's a head sitting there when they come around the corner or open the drawer or something. And it went from that, got caught up in my morbid fascination. I made a comment and someone wrote about it that when I was young, I was about 8 or 9 years old, I went to this little it was like a record store or something, and they had this crowd of kids there, and there was a magic show. And this guy, you've probably seen it, the fake guillotine, hand pressed, and they put the potato there, and someone puts their neck in the brace, and they slam this thing down, and the potato down below chops in two, but the person's head doesn't fall off, right? And everybody gets very fascinated by that. Oh my God. And then when he puts the blade in place and he pushes it down, it goes through that neck hole, but it never chops anybody's head off. Okay, so he wanted to volunteer out of the, I'm not standing in this crowd watching the show.
This is supposed to be,
And he wanted to volunteer out of the audience. And
possessive
some quite beautiful little
wish you want
16-year-old girl gets up there and is big laughing, all giddy and stuff. And I started getting caught up in this. I said, wow.
Now he's lying.
Right at that moment, I departed reality because logically, I should have been able to ascertain that that could not happen. You're not going to get away with chopping somebody's head off in the middle of Helena, Montana, the capital city. But the concept of it was so raw and it was titillating. I says, wow, gee, I got to watch this. And he had her girlfriend come over and put her hands there to catch her head so it wouldn't fall in the basket, And he was making jokes about this. I got caught up in this interplay between normal concerns. You don't want to get a bump on her head. Well, hey, if you're chopping her head off, it doesn't matter, right? And this is catching in my mind somehow, and I'm saying, wow. And naturally, everybody let out a shriek, and they're all excited and oh, wow. And as he chops and the potato falls and her head doesn't go anyplace, and he unlocks the brace and she gets out laughing and he gives her some little prize for coming up and participating in the experiment. That's the first time I'd ever seen a show like that. You see things like that on TV, it's one thing, but to be there and watch things like that, you get more caught up in it. And I went from there, that became another piece. That's the only way I can really, the only event in my life that I can align that fascination with was the fact that she was a very alluring young lady. I'm coming close to approaching puberty. I think I hit it a little early because between the ages of about 10 and 13, I was going through some incredible emotional shifts. And they say that going into puberty for young men and girls, I guess, is a very, very upheaving time in their lives. And without a lot of positive input from parental or adult figures, it can go in some really wild directions. In my case, it was embedded in this negative orientation thing. I would go back to my basement bedroom and I would fantasize to protect myself. I'd go off into fantasy worlds that got a vengeance on my enemies. It got even with the bullies who picked on the kids and me in school. It got even with someone who slighted me. Even adults. I mean, they talk in various relationships how we have our darker side, and there's things that you have thought, as an example, that you never want to share with anybody because they're so cruel or they're so unspeakably out of sync with what's going on that you would be too ashamed to share it with someone. Like, boy, I'd like to knock his head off, or I'd like to kill this guy, or she's such a bitch, We all do that. I didn't know that. So I'm adding to the problem, the impetus of this negative orientation. I must be really evil little kid because I'm thinking all these horrible things. I was thinking of them in increasing amounts and increasing frequency, so it's a kind of conditioning. And negative conditioning that I wasn't aware of other than a fact. I noticed that if I worked on a certain scenario, a certain kind of patterning in my fantasies, right, after a while it became numb, it became insignificant, it became not enough. So I had to add embellishments to it, a new level. And it just very subtle, but for many, many years, it just kept going more and more. I've known young people that I've been able to talk to honestly, and knowing them well enough and friendly enough over enough years, share with me, because it was real importance to me to know where I dove off the deep end. And they would admit that sometimes they went off into happier orientations. They had a period where they went off into some real morbid or negative fascinations, but they grew out of it, quote unquote, grew out of it. It stopped providing a service that they needed. It stopped filling a hole or a gap, or let's say an adult came along and started sharing something with them or showed them a new avenue of acting out that completely obliterated that need or vacated it, and they let it go. I didn't. The adult wasn't there. My mother was there. She was there to beat me. She was there to humiliate me. She was there to use me as an example of how inferior men are. And that was a great little lady there. She kind of preceded this female movement we have now of getting rights, of getting equal rights, of getting equal standing, of getting equal presence in various theaters.
But actually, you had experimented.
I was finding out the hard way what women's rights and women's antagonism. I mean, women are drove about things like that. They get upset about the belittlements they get and the lack of equality that they experience. Unfortunately, my mother developed, and it's not fair to talk about a dead person that way. They can't defend themselves. They can't give you another perspective on what really happened. I can only surmise to try to be fair. Looking back on it, I'm seeing that she was making an effort to balance her pain with what she was experiencing. And if you look at her dad, he's a wimp. He never did anything. Mom did everything, so she orientated toward her. So she comes out doing that stuff. I find out in sociological studies and psychological studies, that's normal. Not necessarily healthy, but that happens. And my dad, being the wimp out of his family, goes and finds my mom, who's the dynamo out of her family, and they get married, and it'll either work or it won't. And in his case, it didn't work because she kept hammering on him. She wanted him to change this. She wanted him to change that. And he couldn't handle that. After 13 years, he'd had enough. What I resented was I had a mother, I had a father. Father worked, he brought in a big paycheck. We had a nice house, we had friends, we went to school, right? We had birthdays, we had Christmas, we had vacations. He had Saturday night with the poker buddies out in the guest house by the garage. We were living pretty good. And she absolutely hated that. This stereotypical response of this deadhead, this buttonhead she's married to, of wanting to go out and play cards in a smoke-filled room, drinking beer and with these old war buddies. See, I had another problem. My father was in the 1st Special Service Force in World War II. They did a book and a movie called The Devil's Brigade. He was a combat sergeant in that group. And he volunteered for that as a single man. They would not take married men. That's how my parents met. She was working as a secretary in Helena, Montana, the capital city. He's a few miles out of town at an old, retired, closed-down cavalry fort for the U.S. Army that was reopened as a secret base for these guys to train out of at Fort William Henry Harrison, just outside of town. They got to know each other. They quite, it wasn't secretly, but it was very quietly got married, because if they'd have known he got married, he'd have been kicked out of the group. This is what was described as a suicide brigade. 5,000 men trained in all his devastation ways, right? He goes off to war, and he does some horrible things.
World War II.
He can't talk about those things.
And that's it. Yeah. Dang it. That's it.
Well, I'm not an expert. I'm not an authority.
I don't know. He's one of the smartest. It's definitely one of the smartest that's ever killed. He's a unique individual. I've had clients not like him, but that they'll just tell you like it is. They'll tell you about their crimes as if I don't know, they're ordering a pie from the bakery or something. Just give me apple with some cinnamon on it or something. They just to them it doesn't register, but he at least has the ability to have some apparently introspective on himself, to the extent that he knows what the hell he's potentially was driving him. A lot of these serial killers, they don't do that. They don't know. They just, they say, well, it was an urge, and I had a prostitute, she was a prostitute, and I had to do it. So he at least, it may be that his high IQ is involved. I don't know. He may be being honest. He may be bullshitting us, but FBI thought he was pretty honest, and with the behavioral science unit. So that's Ed Kemper. His Big Ed, as they call him, and the co-ed killer. I may do help. The guy who's talking about Herbert Mullins. It's a weird story. He's often not remembered, and I'd kind of like to do those that aren't. I mean, everybody knows Gacy. Everybody knows, Eileen Wuornos. I mean, they're known. So I'm not going to cover them. I did Bundy because that one last interview, I thought it was important. And but these are the type of people we deal with as criminal defense attorneys. I mean, they don't have to be. Well, I don't know that they weren't killers. I had a client that, unfortunately, I got him I still to this day cannot figure out why he was with this woman. She was a meth head. She had no teeth. Second time I met her, she had gotten false teeth because I didn't recognize her. I mean, he was like 25, and she was a meth head, strung out, a couple kids, and I don't know. He just lost it, and got some assault, domestic violence charges on her, or she got them on him, and of course she was wanting to drop them. And anyway, we pled him to get him out because it was just wasting time. And the DA made a deal, and at the time the charges were DV, but it was a silly way they got him on a DV. It really wasn't, but we knew he had mental issues, so we pled him to that. And, it should have prevented him from getting a gun. This is why I always laugh when politicians say, we've got to have background checks and better background checks and red flag laws. If they want a damn gun, they're going to get a gun. He did a year later illegally. He probably stole it, got off the street, and he went and found this crackhead or meth head, shot and killed her, shot the guy she was with. He lived. I got appointed to him too. I can't believe it. Still, it blows my mind. Saw his fresh bullet wounds. And I mean, it just blew my mind. How is this possible? And then he turned the gun on himself and he ended himself. So that's my experience with these people, and that's what they do. You know, it's like, it's hard to live with, though, once you've experienced this guy. He was normal. He seemingly was normal. I didn't think there was an issue with him. I thought the charges were over the top, way over the top. Like I said, we got it pled down to misdemeanor stuff, so he had time served and got out. And he had to want to, you know, once he's voluntarily and knowingly and voluntarily informed, you know, he can make a plea. And he took the plea. You know, that's what he wanted to do. I could have went to trial and probably won half of them. But there was some of the charges for, you know, like an assault or something. It was with a car. He hit her car with the other one. Stupid. But neither here nor there. I mean, there was something off with him. You know, why is this good-looking kid, 25-year-old man, with a meth head? I mean, it just didn't make sense. It was bizarre. And he just couldn't let her go. Yeah. Anyway. Excuse me. Anyway, I'm going on a tangent. I'm tired. I've had pneumonia, so forgive me. But it just sucked that guy later on killed, you know, another person and himself. It really sucks, and it stays with you. And, you know, it's like, well, could I have done something? No. Alabama didn't. They still don't. It's a joke. They've got a mental hospital. Nobody goes there. Nobody uses it. Kentucky's got 2. They don't use the damn things either. Good luck trying to get someone committed. Oh, do you want to hurt yourself? No? Oh, okay. You're fine. Meanwhile, they're trying to tell you they've cracked the code to the Matrix, and they freaking, you know, have a rocket in their house to go to Mars. And they really believe it. It's not. We're not doing what we need to be doing with society. It's really messed up. But I'm glad that y'all could hang around. If you would, please hit subscribe, like, leave a comment. See if there's someone else you want me to cover. Hey, lay it down there. We can at least try to look something up, and we'll go over it. May even have to do it out of a book. That's fine. We can do that too. And y'all have a good night. Okay. Don't go to law school. Whatever you do, don't go there. All right. Thanks, y'all.